Welcome to Uses for American Rescue Plan Act funds. This is a presentation from the Minnesota Association of Townships intended to help all townships understand the possibilities for the uses of their ARPA funds. This is going to be presented by myself, Steve Fenske, and Carl Christian Johannesson. The presentation will cover the four main categories of spending available to townships. Those being responses to the pandemic itself, premium pay to essential employees, lost revenue replacement, and infrastructure investment. We'll also talk about the specific ineligible expenditures that have been called out in the federal guidance. And throughout this, we'll try and provide examples of valid and invalid expenditures. To be clear, we don't have everything listed here because there's a lot of options available to townships and other local governments. And as this program has just begun, we're only seeing the start of those uses. As time goes by, we're likely to see more innovative uses of this and possibly even changes in the law that allow for more. The first and most obvious use for ARPA money is in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this will be familiar to townships who participated in the CARES Act because most of that money was dedicated to addressing direct problems from the pandemic. So here, the township is going to try and identify a current or future effect of COVID-19 on public health or on the township, maybe on individuals, families, or businesses. And when we talk about current or future, we're looking at the date March 3rd, 2021 or later. And in general, any spending under ARPA needs to be after that date. There are a few exceptions that we will mention, but that's the general starting point. And that runs through December 31st, 2024. So between that period, the town has to either have the expense or the money would need to be obligated. And however that money is used, it has to be to address that need that we identified, some current or future problem from COVID-19. There are a lot of options to do this. This is a very broad category, and this is where we will have some examples, but there are many more. One common question, both in CARES Act and with ARPA, has been, what about HVAC systems or air exchange systems? And the answer depends on what that system is. If it's a standard air system, it wouldn't qualify. But if it has some kind of purification or air exchanger, then yes, it would qualify. And with this kind of example, what we did was we identified the problem that we want to use an indoor space, and we want to follow guidelines that we move air through that space relatively frequently, and that reduces the likelihood that people will catch disease from each other. And one possibility is a system that does that. Now, that standard system doesn't accomplish that, but if you add filtration, more than just a standard filter, but an actual system designed to address microbes or an air exchanger, then yeah, that system would fit and your ARPA money could be used for that purpose. Another example, installing automated features. This could be doors, faucets, paper towel dispensers, any manner of touchless feature reduces the number of contact points that people can pass germs. This is something that could work. A third example, expansion or modification of facilities. So many township halls are very small and they don't accommodate a lot of people even if we try to pack them in, but many towns would like to be able to use them. One possibility is to expand or modify those facilities so that they can either hold more people or that they can accommodate distancing better, or so that they create barriers between sections so that people may not be distance as much, but there's some barrier between them. Each of those is a possibility for townships. This could include adding doors so that you create one-way flow of traffic, an entry door and an exit door in another place. In particular for voting, we saw this was useful. It could include ramps that are needed, which has the added benefit of allowing ADA compliance if possible. And it could even be communication windows, something like that, where people can talk to each other with a little bit more distance. Another common question was purchasing personal protective equipment, cleaning equipment, things like this. All of that is, of course, something that the money could be used for. And with this program, you could probably do it on a broader basis than just the township itself, its employees and officers, because you have more flexibility with this program. Those are pretty directly related to COVID and prevention of spreading disease, but they also don't tend to cost a lot. So those are certainly within the option. Towns can also create grant programs, and this was available in CARES Act, and due to the short time periods, many didn't want to try doing this. But with ARPA, we have a lot longer, and these kind of grant systems, they can go, grant programs, they can be done with small businesses or with individuals and families. The procedure here is going to be that the town will need to create a process. They'll have to have an application, something that shows need. They'll have to review them and award the grants. And that can include some follow-up to see how was that money used. Can we show that it was used in the way we intended? But part of the purpose of this money was to help communities, not just local governments. So your town may use a grant program either by itself or in cooperation with neighbors. Another option that we are encouraging all townships to take advantage of is technology. Technology has allowed much of the world to continue working even while remote, even during the pandemic. Every township really should be using this money, if they haven't already, to get needed computers, perhaps the clerk and the treasurer, to run CTAS. They could use tablets or computers or Chromebooks or other devices like that for supervisors to accommodate them working remotely, meeting remotely. This could be audio-visual systems that in the town hall or other meeting space that allow projection of the materials that the board is looking at. And this prevents the need for people to share paper, to take the public packet and hand it across to however many people want to touch it that night. Again, this reduces how many times people have to interact and touch the same thing. Projectors or screens in general, same kind of goal there. It can be sound systems to accommodate more distancing, and remote communication devices. This could be things like the equivalent of a Ring doorbell, something like that, where somebody may be able to see what's going on outside the building and not have to go and interact with somebody until they know they actually need to. All of these allow for remote work and help people avoid interaction if and when that's needed again. It also reduces the need for paper. Another possibility is to provide donations to service groups and nonprofits, and this is similar to grants, but we list it separately because it's not necessarily the kind of thing where they would apply and be reviewed based on need. These are the kind of the organizations that it's clear from their mission and activities they're already responding to the pandemic. So Food Shelf is an obvious example and a common recipient of grant money or CARES money, for example, and could also be for ARPA. It's clear there the food shelf activities are related to the pandemic. People have lost jobs or having economic problems. They may need food assistance. That's where we've identified the issue, and giving this money would help alleviate that problem. Now, there are other groups. There are family service groups who help individuals and families other than in food needs. It could be shelters. It could be a variety of uses. It could be childcare potentially to allow people to get back to work and still have good childcare. It can be any other nonprofit where that group's activities are related to the effects of the pandemic. This is broad, and that's why we've listed MAT, the Township Association. Okay, so our association, like many places, is helping to address and help manage the pandemic. This money can go to those kinds of groups. This is a wide option. Now, for those groups that wouldn't qualify, say a recreational services nonprofit, they're a T-ball, a baseball association. Well, that's not really a pandemic response. And that one would be more appropriate to do under a grant that we talked about earlier, or they may be a recipient, but it's because they're going to have to show some other need, not because their activity itself is related to the pandemic.
The town can also transfer to other entities. Generally, this is going to be difficult because the recipient will need to abide by serving the town in some way. So towns should only use this as a last resort. Towns can transfer to local governments, the state government, and nonprofits. And there are two major categories of who can receive these funds. The first is going to be subrecipients. This includes other local governments and nonprofits. Now there's a big limitation here laid out in the Treasury's rules. It says that the transferee must abide by the restrictions on use applicable to the transferor under ARPA and other applicable law and program guidance. What this means is that the town cannot transfer to another town or city unless certain criteria are met. This will often include having to serve the township in some way. If we look at special purpose districts that serve the town, they can receive payments like fire or EMS. Nonprofits that also serve the town can also receive these transfers. Look at food shelves, family or job assistance organizations, and other nonprofits like MAT. There are non-subrecipients as well. This will include the state or territory. These aren't a subrecipient, meaning they're not limited by the limitation. So the state and territories are subject to their own ARPA rules, but not the limitation of serving the individual township. The second major category of use under ARPA is premium pay to essential employees. This is different from ARPA, as ARPA is generally forward-looking, meaning that costs incurred only after March of 2021 can be relieved by ARPA. However, premium pay differs in that essential workers may receive retroactive increases to their pay to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Treasury rule lists some essential workers, for instance, most healthcare professionals and some sanitation workers. However, the rules clearly state that this list is not exclusive, and there may be additional workers considered essential by your township board. Premium pay may increase an essentials worker income up to a maximum of $13 per hour or $25,000 annually. This must be paid in addition to the wage paid by the township, meaning the premium pay cannot be used in lieu of paying the worker their standard wage. In other words, the town must pay the base or standard wage the employee would have earned without the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. For an example of premium pay, let's look at a town that hired an employee to have the hall cleaned in compliance with the Department of Economic Development's guidance. The town paid this employee $15 an hour. However, the town may retroactively increase the employee's pay with the premium pay provision up to $28 an hour. This can start when the employee began their work to comply with the deed guidance. The third major category of ARPA uses is also the most broad. Lost revenue replacement can be used for most government services. However, these services do have to be pay-go funded projects. It cannot be used to pay off debt. How we determine what lost revenue looks like is you take the formula seen here, which includes the base year, the growth adjustment, the number of months elapsed from the base year to the calculation date, and then the actual general revenue. This formula is fairly complicated, and there are tools such as certain calculators that can help determine what the town's lost revenue is. We can see one of these calculators for lost revenue. The first question it asks is the town's base revenue. This will be the total amount the town collected in 2019. Next, you'll be asked about growth adjustment. You can figure this out in one of two ways. First, the town can calculate its own growth over the 3 previous years, this being 2017 to 2019. Or the town can use a standard 4.1% inflation rate. After that, the town will want to input its end of fiscal year, which is December 31st of 2019. Here we can see the total amount the town should receive in the following years. This is the town's counterfactual revenue. However, the town's actual revenue may change. And so if the town adds their actual revenue into the actual revenue section, this again will generally be the amount the town levies in those years. And if it remains consistent, the town will see a 4.1% revenue loss in those succeeding years if it just uses the standard growth adjustment rate. Now let's look at some examples of revenue loss. In example 1, we can see that the town levied $100,000 in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Because there's no growth for the town to calculate, the town should use the defined rate of 4.1%. Based upon this rate, the town is expected to receive $104,000 in 2020, $108,000 in 2021, $112,000 in 2022, and $117,000 in 2023. If the town's levy does not reflect this amount in these years, it may use the difference between that year's levy and the expected levy based upon these rates as its lost revenue amount for that year. So for example, if we look back at 2020, if the town actually levied $100,000, then that town will receive $4,100 as lost revenue in 2020. Let's move on to example 2. The town sets their levy at $100,000 in 2018 and 2019. But because of a large project, the town had to increase that levy to $200,000 in 2017. Although there is growth at the beginning of this term, because the growth rate declined since 2017, the town will want to use the 4.1% rate as its growth adjustment. Therefore, the town will receive the same amount for each year as it did in example 1. Now, if the town levies $100,000 in 2017 and 2018, but because of a project increased their levy to $200,000 in 2019, the annual growth rate in this case increases substantially to about 41%. Any reduction is presumed to be because of the COVID-19 pandemic. With these previous factors in place, the town is presumed to have received $283,000 in 2020, $400,000 in 2021, $566,000 in 2022, and $801,000 in 2023. If the town's levy does not reflect this amount in the following years, it may use that difference between that year's levy and the expected levy based upon the inflation as its lost revenue amount for that year. Now, if the town's levy is $100,000 in 2017 and 2018, but because of a budget surplus, the levy is reduced to $0 in 2019, the town will receive no money. This is because if the town levied $0, the town did not lose any revenue for the purposes of the American Rescue Plan Act.
If you're confused about revenue loss, that is okay because this is a complicated topic. The takeaways from this section are to understand first that each town is potentially eligible for revenue loss money. Second, the revenue loss money is the least restricted. It's more like general fund than anything else in this program. Third, if this is confusing, the very basic steps are to open the calculator, put in the top line number of your 2019 revenue, and then you go to the bottom of the calculator, and the bottom chart has the space for actuals. It's under the green actual revenue section. And you put in the actual revenue from each of the years. So at this point, we would know the actual revenue from 2020. But we may not know 2021 yet, and we don't know 22 and 23. So at this point, you would have the ability to put in those just two boxes, and it will spit out a number for the 2020 lost revenue. If nothing else, you may use that number as your lost revenue calculation. Now, some townships may be in special circumstances where they're eligible for more, and they may be able to go through the processes that Carl was talking about to find that actual revenue loss number. But if nothing else, use the basic numbers, and you will get that up to 4.1% based on the revenue loss that you have. The last piece that this tells us is that you can have revenue loss in each of the years of this ARPA program. So if you still have money left over near the end date of this program, you can take that as general fund, effectively general fund revenue loss. So there's reason to hold on to some of this if you have reason to believe you'll have revenue loss in the later years.
The fourth and final major category for the use of ARPA funds is on certain infrastructure costs, namely water, sewer, and broadband. Eligible uses for funds under water and sewer hold a wide range of projects that could be eligible. However, they also have to be eligible to receive financial assistance through the EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Fund, CWSRF, or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, DWSRF. Eligible DWSRF categories include treatment, transmission and distribution, which includes lead pipe service line replacement, source rehabilitation and decontamination, storage and consolidation, as well as new systems development. Eligible CWSRF categories include construction of publicly owned treatment works, non-point source pollution management, national estuary program projects, decentralized wastewater treatment systems, stormwater systems, water conservation, efficiency, and reuse measures, watershed pilot projects, energy efficiency measures for publicly owned treatment works, water reuse projects, security measures at publicly owned treatment works, and technical assistance to ensure compliance with the Clean Water Act. As for broadband, the town must implement broadband with 100 megabits per second download speed and 100 megabits per second upload speed. The speed standard is set to support telework or remote schooling. The town can also provide assistance to individual households that have broadband service that provide less than 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. The American Rescue Plan Act not only calls out specific eligible uses, but it also looks at specific ineligible expenditures or uses. The first of which is going to be a deposit into a pension fund. This only applies if the payment reduces a town's liability incurred prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the payment occurs outside the recipient's regular timing for making such payments. This is going to be distinct from a payroll contribution, meaning it does not apply the benefits that are included as part of the employee's wages, like a 401k or a pension. Only the increases to pension funds outlined above are what applies to this ineligible expenditure. The next ineligible expenditure is an offset to a reduction in net tax revenue. The reduction in revenue is ineligible if it comes from a change in law, regulation, or administrative interpretation, meaning something like the electors reducing the levy at the annual meeting will not qualify as an ineligible expenditure because it's not coming from a change in law, regulation, or administrative interpretation. There are other restrictions on use as well. For example, other federal restrictions. Again, for example here, the town can't use ARPA funds as a local match for a federal grant if the grant specifically disallows for the use of federal funds to match the grant. In conclusion here, there's a lot of information and a lot of ways that towns can use these funds. We didn't cover everything here, and as we continue to understand the American Rescue Plan Act and the Treasury's guidance, we will get more information. If you have any questions about your specific use, please reach out to us. With that being said, thank you for listening and have a good rest of your day.